A huge thank you to patron Terry Smithwick for suggesting today's video topic. If you want to suggest a topic for next Wednesday's Name Explain video, then all you have to do is support Name Explain on Patreon for just $1 a month. Find out more by visiting patreon.com/Name Explain, which will be linked down below. Anyway, English is a language which has picked up a lot of influences in its lexicon. It is first and foremost a Germanic tongue, meaning many of its words are similar or even the exact same to other Germanic tongues like German. Words like computer, taxi and baby are exactly the same in both languages. Much of English is derived from Latin too, due to the fact that English's home was ruled by the Romans for some time, and even beyond that, Latin has played a vital role in religion and science in the land too. English words like animal, terrain and error all have their origins in Latin words. Then there's English's French influence thanks to the Norman invasion of 1066, which gave us words like beef, gasoline and injury. There's even words in English which come from the nearby Celtic languages like Welsh. Penguin, crumpet and flannel are all of Welsh origins. By one metric, English is the most widely spoken language on the planet, and the key reason it is so prominent across the globe is for its willingness to adapt and pick up words from other tongues it finds itself interacting with, akin to a magpie finding treasures for its nest. This plundering of other languages means that English is full to the brim with words from across the globe. One of the more interesting languages that English has acquired a boatload of words from, in my estimation however, is from a land that is miles away from the modern English-speaking world like the UK, USA and Australia. This being the language of Hindi, which yes I know is the same as Urdu and collectively known as Hindustani. To streamline this video, I'm going to refer to it as just Hindi. If you want to know more about the origin and split in the Hindustani languages, I have a whole video on the matter. There are seriously so many words which are commonly heard in English which have their origins in the language most linked to the nation of India. Of course, some of these Hindi words are kind of obvious because they are linked with things deeply related to India, like food. Indian food has become widely enjoyed across the English-speaking world. In the UK, curry is seen as a national dish, in the same way fish and chips or toad in the hole is, though British curry is somewhat different to the native stuff. Indian food words like aloo, chutney, kedgeree and roti all come from Hindi, but in all honesty that isn't too surprising. The ones we are most interested in are words that come from Hindi which aren't deeply linked with India today. Take a word like shampoo in example. Shampoo isn't tied to India in the same way their food is, but the word used every day by English speakers comes from the language. Specifically, it derives from a Hindi word meaning to rub, which is fitting as you rub shampoo into your hair. Then we have the word thug coming from a word meaning thief. Pajama initially meant just a leg garment in Hindi. Bungalow is from Hindi too and means a house in the Bengali style. Jungle initially meant cultivated land in the language. Bandana comes from a word meaning to tie, as this piece of headgear is normally tied up in some way. And punch, as in the drink, comes from the Hindi word for five, as traditionally punch was made with just 5 ingredients. English even stole the word of loot from Hindi, which ironically comes from their language's word for steel. Is that irony? Have I used irony right? I don't know, let's carry on. This is just a handful of commonly heard English words that are secretly Hindi in origins, but they show us just how many words actually come from this language. From ones deeply linked with Hindi's home, to words that today slot in neatly with the rest of English's lexicon. At first glance, Hindi and English might seem like very different languages to one another, from the way they sound to even the scripts they are written in. In reality, they are actually related, albeit very distantly. Both tongues are part of the huge Indo-European language family. They however sit on two completely different branches. English resides on the Germanic branch as mentioned, while Hindi finds itself on the Indo-Iranian branch, with relatives like Punjabi, Bengali and Sinhalese. This makes English and Hindi very distant cousins of one another or something. Sure, they ultimately share a great-great-great-great-grandparent, but at a family reunion they'll still probably need to introduce themselves to one another. Suffice to say, the linguistic ties they have to one another is not the key reason as to why so many Hindi words have found themselves at home in English. The main reason this is the case is down to global migration and the history which has played out on our planet. The English language has found itself at home in India, the hub of the Hindi-speaking world, and Hindi speakers have found themselves at home in the English-speaking world too. English is one of the most widely spoken languages in India. Kind of. It doesn't have a huge amount of native speakers, just over 250,000 of the billion plus population of India. English's numbers in India rise dramatically when you include people who speak as a second or even third tongue. Including all these people makes English India's second most spoken language. English is now India's second tongue, all down to the long period of time the land was under British rule. India did not become a British colony overnight. Instead, it was a slow creep of power in the land. It really began in 1600, when Queen Elizabeth I granted a charter to the East India Trading Company. This was a private company which was formed mainly to trade in Asia, to bring goods and wealth back to Britain. While their initial aim was the area in their name, East India, which today equates to places like Indonesia and Malaysia, they didn't have too much luck there. This is because by the time the British got there, the Dutch had a huge amount of control over this neck of the woods. Refusing to be defeated, the East India Company instead started trading with the various empires and powers who ruled parts of modern-day India at the time, bringing spices, dyes, and perhaps most importantly, tea back to the UK. While this began as simple trading, the East India Company eventually started encroaching more and more in India. At first, simple warehouses and fortresses were set up by the East India Company in the land, which led to them controlling a huge majority of the land. Between 1757 and 1858, the East India Company were ruling a huge amount of modern India. This company was exactly that, a private company. This would be like McDonald's ruling Sweden or something. For many natives of India, life under rule of the East Indian Company meant a life of poverty and violence as they become lower citizens on their own soil. Many natives sided with the British for wealth and protection. This included the sepoys, Indian soldiers who fought in the East Indian Company's army. These sepoys, however, rebelled against the East India Company in 1857 due to the supposed use of pig and cow grease in guns. This upset the sepoys as using products of these animals was against their religions. The sepoys' rebellion killed thousands, and due to this, India was taken away from the East India Company and put under direct rule of the British Crown, becoming the British Raj in 1858. Direct British Crown rule like this lasted all the way until 1947, when India was given independence as well as being partitioned. This meant that India was under English-speaking rule in some way, shape or form for around 300 years. It's understandable why the languages of English and Hindi would intermix like they have. These words would have found themselves being used in the wider English-speaking world when English natives who went to India arrived back in Britain. This wasn't just a one-way system, however. Across history, people from India have migrated to the English-speaking world too. A lot of this initially was a result of Britain's claim over India. In the early days of the East India Company's rule of India, many natives were brought back to the UK on ships, in many cases against their will. They were worked as sailors or builders, and many even found themselves working more domestic jobs like being servants or nannies. Of course, not all Indians in the UK were brought there against their will. Many chose to migrate over for education reasons or the idea to have a better life in Britain. Even way after the end of British rule in India, in the mid-20th century, many people from India migrated to the UK and even do to this day. The 2021 census of the UK revealed that just over 3% of the UK's population are of Indian origin, whether they migrated over or they were born here to Indian parents. Indian people haven't migrated to just the UK. The largest English-speaking nation of the US has also welcomed in a large amount of Indian people too. This started in the early 19th century, when many from the nation found themselves in the land of opportunities to try and chase that fabled American dream. What's interesting here is where they arrived. The story of migration into the USA normally starts in New York City and Ellis Island, but due to India's proximity to the USA, many actually first arrive on the West Coast. To this day, California still has one of the larger Indian communities in the States, though New York is still very popular too. Indians now make up the second largest expat community in the USA, just behind those from Mexico. Even Australia has a large Indian population, with the countries having somewhat shared interests and histories. Nothing brings people together quite like sacking off the British, I suppose. Of course, not all these Indians who have migrated to the English-speaking world over the centuries would have spoken Hindi. The country has a huge amount of linguistic diversity. Languages like Kannada, Punjabi, and Telugu most likely arrived in the UK and USA too, but as Hindi is the most widely spoken native language of India, it's most likely this is the one that travelled the most. What this shows us is that English and Hindi really have intermixed all across the globe, so it's not entirely surprising how many words of Hindi have found themselves being used in English. But even this isn't a one-way streak. Not only is English full of words of Hindi origin, Hindi has found itself full of words of English origin. The Hindi words for party, television, system, office, and computer all sound more or less identical to the English words. This once again comes from the shared history these languages have and the shared land that they both call home. But this isn't to say the languages are identical. Just because you speak English won't make you fluent in Hindi or vice versa, but undoubtedly some words will ring a bell or two. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.